They were refugees. They left the cradle of civilization, from the valley of the Nazarene, from their ancestral homes, from their parents and friends, for the new world. They never returned. They were refugees. My name's Samuel Davis. Born and raised in Fayette County, born in Republic, Pennsylvania, and live in Uniontown. I practice law. I'm the author of They Were Immigrants, the lasting legacy of my Syrian grandparents. I've been practicing law here since 1976 with my brother James Davis at Davis & Davis. I'm married to my lovely wife, Regina. We've been married for since 1976, the year I started practicing law. We have 2 daughters, Courtney Davis Walker, and I have a younger daughter, Meredith, who lives in New York City and is an actor, and she also is a teacher. It seems to me that you should only try to tell stories about what you know, and these are the people who shaped my life, my brother's life, my mother, my father, our family, our extended family, our aunts and uncles. We grew up around each other. Our cousins and boys and girls were like brothers and sisters to us. We walked in and out of everyone's homes. It was a time of innocence and growth. And they shaped my values and my thinking. I felt that their story, as every prior generation, would be lost, and it would be important to those who are still with us to have an idea, at least as to what I thought about my life and about their influence on my life. And so that's why I told the story. That was the personal side of it. The other part of it was because of what I felt was occurring in this country politically about immigrants and the statements made about immigrants and refugees, but about immigrants and their not necessarily being welcomed or being valued. And it was important for me to tell the other people in this country who are all children of immigrants about my life and about our immigrant family and about how we have grown in this country.
Shutterstock Music.
Well, immigrant to me means someone who's coming from somewhere where there's little hope to a place where there is great hope. That's how I always thought of an immigrant, someone who was coming here to better their lives. They weren't required to come here as a refugee who is fleeing for his life because of social or political reasons, but an immigrant comes because he wants to better his life. So I've always thought of an immigrant as someone who wants to be a part of America, who came here to be a part of America, who came from a place where there was little hope to a place where, even though the streets weren't paved with gold, there was an opportunity to do better. And the financial success can't be understated. People had an opportunity to make their lot in life better than their parents and their children's lot in life better than theirs. And that's how I've always viewed an immigrant. The American dream means that freedom of religion, that freedom from want, the freedom from fear, that idea of being able to live your life within your own sphere as independent as you can without unreasonably encroaching on those around you. This is a very prosperous country, and people want to become a part of that. I think, though, that the way it was set up, where you can be free to live your life, at the beginning, obviously, to honor your Creator in the way you felt was best. That's the American dream. The first thing I think about is my mother when I think about the word family, because of her not only devotion to me and my brother and to my father and to our little family, but to her fierce loyalty to her other brothers and sisters and her nephews and nieces. When she died, I remember my cousin saying at the funeral, I was Aunt Thelma's favorite, and everybody laughed because he then said, but we were all her favorites. It's unusual for us not to have a house full of people. It was very unusual when I was a little boy, and because so many of my mother's sisters and brothers lived in close proximity, Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, those kinds of holidays were extremely important. We would go to everyone's house and spend time. Everybody would be there, and I mean everybody. It seemed like all my aunts, all my uncles, we would all get together, and there was always Arabic food and bread and games and competitions. There was always a competition. It was very important to compete. Food and family, and it was a kind of a combination. And it was the aromas were intense, and the conversation was lively, and it was a lot of laughter, and it was very important. I was thinking about how both spiritual and superstitious the older people were, and I don't mean to conflate the two. There's a difference between being spiritual and being superstitious. But my Uncle Sam, Sam Anthony, Big Sam, he had a fear of certain things, and he was not afraid of any human being, but he had a fear of snakes. And it bothered him when he'd see a snake, and he didn't want to show fear in front of me. He used to say to me, I would say to him, Uncle Sam, why don't you have any hair on your chest? He'd say, hair don't grow on steel. So he was a flamboyant character too, and he was a giant. But he had a superstition. He believed that people had an evil eye. So we saw someone coming, and he said to me, that no good such and such. And I said, why do you say that, Uncle Sam? I thought you were friends. Another old Syrian. He said, he got evil eye. He went like that. I said, what do you mean? He said, he looked at Bonadoodle, tomato. He said, looked at tomato plant. It died. And, and it was so scary to me. I didn't want, and from that point, I didn't want this guy looking at me. I kind of, I was maybe 5 or 6, and Uncle Sam was so serious when he said it, because I think he believed it. I enjoyed writing about, at the very beginning, I enjoyed writing about Jim and I, and one of my very first memories, and getting a Christmas tree. And it was almost as if I was actually reliving the moments. I could, the smells, the tactile, the feel. It was a extremely vivid memory, and that was enjoyable. In writing about that was enjoyable. It's about family, but in discussing family, it's not only that nuclear or extended family, it truly is the family of man. The idea that we're separate and apart because of where we came from or where we live today has to be something that we overcome if we're going to prosper as a society, and even more so as a people. So we have to think in terms of all, in our country, of all being from somewhere else and all being here because we have hope and a desire to do better and a desire to make others better. We're all immigrants here. We really are. And some longer than others, but we all have an equal stake in this country, an opportunity to make the country better. This idea too, that it's really offensive in my mind, that we're only going to bring immigrants here now who have something to offer. That is, in my mind, an outrage. That's an outrage. So now we're going to have class distinctions. We're going to let people come here if they're doctors or if they're scientists. But we're not going to let people come here who have manual skills or who are willing to work in the gardens. We're not going to let them come. You just have to be a human being to understand that the ones who need to come here the most are the ones who are going to be segregated and pushed out. In the early days of the 20th century, my 4 grandparents fled their homeland. They left with their pride and their clothes on their back, and by way of Ellis Island, settled here in what were then the coal fields of southwestern Pennsylvania. They were refugees. They left the cradle of civilization, from the valley of the Nazarene, from their ancestral homes, from their parents and friends, for the New World. They never returned. They were refugees. They started families. They worked hard. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren became teachers, judges, dentists, businessmen and businesswomen, bankers, psychologists, lawyers, doctors, software developers, moms, dads, and grandparents. They served in the Army, Navy, and Air Force, and fought overseas in World War II and Vietnam. They donated to the less fortunate. They became members of school boards and church councils. They employed thousands and paid millions in taxes. They were and are the descendants of refugees.